Hello, we are Zebrew Odoo solution partner specializing in sustainable solutions with which we aim to make people in Odoo more independent. And here we are with the video explaining why the sync can save you money, even though we have a licensing model. Fundamentally, we have projects and references where a programmed interface was directly the predecessor of the sync, or in our cases, it wasn't competition, but rather things went wrong, and that's why they approached us. And in all cases, it could be shown that if you have a framework and are familiar with it, it is significantly faster than other interfaces. And there are cases where a programmer wants to build an interface even faster, but not with the same quality, meaning we are very confident or often more cost-effective with this solution. And in cases where we are not, it often offers a better value for money. Of course, you must really convince yourselves of this in practice before anyone tells you otherwise. But why is it so? This is because this framework has already been used countless times, and we have already created hundreds of interfaces with it. And until recently, it was used internally by us and not yet as a licensing model exactly, and in doing so, a fundamental part is that a large portion of the interfaces is complete and a large part of the quality is complete, meaning if I do nothing at all, if I, just like in my other demo, connect a small web interface, then I can get it done in 5 minutes. I just tell it briefly where to fetch the data from. I transform the data a bit, map the data a bit, write the data a bit, and just like that, the basic interface is ready, but additionally everything we've built around it so that each run is instantiated, we can determine how long it should be stored, from a few days to many days, that there is monitoring, that I can look across all instances and all my pipelines. And see, now we are here in the demo system where I keep them all running. Which ones are finished, which ones have errors. Where there is an error, I can of course jump in and right at that point solve the problem and try running it again, even in cases where somehow an interface was actually well built, but now the source data is somehow bad or has changed. I go in, fix the data, repeat the process, and don't have to send a complete export afterwards, but have retrieved all the data, exactly the ones he wanted earlier. With such advantages, you are frankly first very quick to achieve results, and even in cases, I would say, where there are odd interfaces that are difficult to map in such a standard framework, we have a significant advantage in quality with everything that is already there and in standardization. That's the next thing. When I have such a framework, then the support is much easier and can be done by more affordable people. An interface that has a brand requires the programmer to look into it and solve the problem. But when I have such a framework, then everything is in the front end. And I click in, and once I've spent a few hours on it, I don't need to be an IT expert or know anything about sync. When I've just seen a little bit, I know. Where it runs into errors, I jump in and see everything step by step right here, what it tried to do, and can change and adjust that exact spot. A fraction of the skills is enough for that, let alone needing anyone external or any deployment. An error that ends up in a programmed interface requires another deployment and thus downtime. But that doesn't happen. In the front end, it's live, and with the next cron job, it will run correctly. And this closely ties into two other topics. Firstly, it's much easier to train someone within such a framework who only needs a few Python snippets and a bit of understanding of data structures. And then they can get started and are someone, let's say, IT savvy, which is cheaper than a programmer, let alone a senior programmer, who in turn is cheaper than a senior external developer. And in another topic, I will revisit this. It doesn't mean that I have to save money because of it. These resources can also be freed up to achieve more during a growth phase. But I can also say, great, I need fewer hours from my external company because I now handle my interfaces myself. And then it is precisely because of this that the support is faster. Or also less, because it is standardized. That means if I have a recurring issue with my interfaces, I can fix it more easily everywhere because it always has the same structure. In this case, we reduced the customer support from 3 full-time people to 1 person at 10%, because it's a framework, and if there happens to be an error, which is not uncommon during development, we fix it in such a way that it is permanently resolved for everyone. So, problems are fixed that you might never have encountered before because another customer of ours had them. Documentation follows the same pattern. Normally, it is very important to document a programmed or externally programmed interface. Otherwise, eventually, no one knows what's going on anymore, why 3 things are accessing something, or why something is different here. But keeping documentation live and up to date is quite an effort, and not exactly a freebie. When I use the Zync, I only need a fraction of the documentation because it always runs the same way. That means if someone asks me why my order import has the wrong prices, then I go into my order import pipeline and check the mapper, specifically the price field, and I can see what it does. We even have an extra comment field so that code can be translated for someone who isn't a coder. And then at the end of the day, the question is, why maintain an Excel or PDF as documentation anymore? If I need everything I have here accessible to anyone, I naturally grant access to this tool. And that could also be exported. But I am most up to date where I see the configuration and most accurate. And since it is always carried out logically in the same way, I would say it's worth the 1 or 2 hours you might need to spend on understanding it, to then forever need only a fraction of the documentation because it's not as current and not as accurate as here. Exactly, it's unbeatable. Yes, and the same applies to adjustments. If I have interfaces that change frequently, then a deployment is always time. The programmer has to open their ID, must change the code, must ensure there are no typos, must push it to Git, must make an update. The system is down for a few minutes. If I'm unlucky, I'm doing several things at once and have already started something. Exactly. But let's assume the best case scenario. Everything works. Nevertheless, correcting a typo is, when I'm already in there, quick. But if I tell someone new who is actually doing something else, half an hour, an hour. If I notice here that I've made a typo somewhere, done. Next time, the field barcode will be exported as name 2. Simply done. In the live system, if I want that. And here too, it doesn't have to be in the live system. We will discuss this more in future videos. We can export complete pipelines to ensure there is also a deployment available here for processes that are too dangerous to change live. This means there are some things that can be changed with little to no risk. And there are processes that should never be touched in the live process and must be fully tested. Both are absolutely possible. Yes, and so everything together, the resource optimization, the repeating framework, the working method itself, all come together to help me save exactly on resource costs, save time, whether in support or transportation. Typically, depending on the size, multiple times, which will determine the Zync license. And since we also consider company size, the full functionality of the Zync is very affordable to have. Yes. Thank you for your attention.